Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Har. Welcome to our second week of class, and this is just a brief overview of the seasons and weather and what affects that. Why are we sometimes, burning up so hot that you're like, oh, the air conditioning's not even touching me, and other times freezing cold, maybe sitting by the fireplace. What in the world causes all of that? So that's what we're going to talk about today in our little discussion here. So when we talk about weather and climate, there's several different factors involved, and people are always talking about the weather. It affects everything we do. It affects life, basically planting, harvesting, and survival. So the weather is really important, but what is weather? Weather is the condition of the bottom layer of the Earth's atmosphere in one place over a short period of time. That's the textbook definition, is that it's the condition of the bottom layer of the Earth's atmosphere in one place over a short period of time. And keep in mind, remember this back from your days in science, the atmosphere is a multi-layer band of gases, water vapor, and dust above the Earth. And a description of the weather usually mentions temperature, moisture, precipitation, and things like wind. So therefore, like a day, they might be described as warm, dry, and calm, or cold, snowy, and very windy. So if weather includes all these factors, then what is climate when we hear the word climate? Climate is the term for the weather patterns that are in an area or region, and typically experiences over a long period of time. The climate of a place depends on a different number of factors, several different factors. That's the climate, and things like elevation, maybe latitude, and maybe location in relation to nearby landforms or bodies of water. That's the climate. It's over the longer period. So when we're talking about what affects weather and climate, we really need to talk about the sun. And the sun is the ultimate source of the Earth's climate and of life on Earth. This big, huge star lies about 93 million miles away. The sun gives off energy and light that is essential for the survival of all plants and animals, and you and I. When we're talking about the sun, I need to bring up, and I don't want to bring up anything political here because we're not going to move in and talk too much about global warming, but you need to understand what the greenhouse effect is. And you guys maybe have heard this from your science classes in the past, but I'm just going to touch on it briefly because we're going to talk about global warming in later weeks in one of our hot topics. But keep in mind the greenhouse effect. Only a small amount of solar radiation actually reaches the Earth's atmosphere. Some of the radiation is reflected back into space by the atmosphere and by the Earth's surface, but enough remains to warm the Earth's land and water. The atmosphere also prevents heat from escaping back into space too quickly. This greenhouse effect, it keeps the Earth's atmosphere, it's kind of been compared to like the glass walls or roof of a greenhouse. For example, the picture I have here, this glass dome. This traps the sun's warmth for growing plants. Without this so-called dome, the Earth would be too cold for most living things. Even inside a dome or a greenhouse or our atmosphere, not all places on, you're inside your greenhouse or on Earth receive the same amount of heat and light from the sun. Day and night, seasonal changes, different climates, all these depend on the relative position of the sun and the Earth. So that's kind of the greenhouse effect. So just so you have in mind that it is a good thing and we really do need that in place. As the Earth moves through space, it moves like a top on its axis, and it's known as its rotation. The axis is an invisible line through the center of the Earth from pole to pole. The Earth completes one rotation in approximately 24 hours. On the side that faces the sun, it's daytime, with warmth coming from the sunlight. On the side turned away, it is night. The Earth also receives or moves around the sun in a nearly circular path called an orbit. A revolution is one complete orbit around the sun, and the Earth completes one revolution every 365 1.25 days, which is basically your length of your year. As the Earth revolves, its position relative to the sun is not straight up and down. Rather, the Earth is tilted. And this is key that you all understand this tilt. It's tilted by 23.5 degrees on its axis. Because of its tilt, the sunlight strikes different parts of the planet more directly at certain times of the year. For example, when the North Pole is tilted towards the sun rays fall more directly on the northern hemisphere, bringing longer, warmer days. The northern hemisphere experiences a season of summer while it is winter on the other side of our Earth in the southern hemisphere. As the Earth moves halfway around the sun, the southern hemisphere tilts close to the sun and the situation is reversed. These changes in seasons are marked by summer or winter solstices. The days when, and I'm so looking forward to our summer solstice here in the middle of our winter here. These are the days when the sun at noon appears directly overhead to observers at the tropics of Capricorn and Cancer. So that is the solstice, the summer solstice and winter solstice. Equinox, the other markers for seasonal change, occur on about March 21st and September 23rd. These days are known as the spring and fall equinox. On these days, the sun at noon appears directly overhead to observers at the equator. Around these dates, the duration of day and night are nearly equal on the Earth, everywhere on Earth. So around these days, the equinox, the duration of day and night are nearly about the same everywhere on Earth. So the angle of the sun's rays affects weather and climate in other ways. Because the Earth is round, the sun's rays always fall most directly at or near the equator. The rays grow less and less direct as they fall closer to the north and south poles. As a result, most places near the equator have warm climates, while the areas furthest from the equator are cold. We geographers often use latitudes or distances from the equator to divide the world into zones. Some of the zones that are out there are the tropical, temperate, and polar. And you'll hear about these. The tropical zones are low latitude zones that are usually pretty warm, and the tropics are hot and year-round. The Earth's two temperate zones are in the middle latitudes. They usually extend from like 23.5 north to 66.5 degrees north, and from 23.5 degrees south to 66.5 degrees south. The temperatures here are generally cooler than the tropics and have a wide range of temperatures. And then we also have the polar zones. And think about that. The word polar should give you a clue where those are. Those are the they're high in latitudes, and they're about 66.5 degrees north and 66.5 degrees south to the poles. And because sunlight strikes here very indirectly, the sun's rays are spread out over a wide area. So polar climates, both poles, are always cold or bitterly, always kind of on the chillier side or bitterly cold. So now let's talk a little bit about the weather. So you understand what affects our climate and general changes, but the weather, remember, weather is short term. What can affect the weather in your area? Well, different things can cause weather on a daily basis. We already know what's going to cause the seasons and the time of year. Those are all going to play into what affects our weather on a daily basis, but things like water vapor, cloud cover, landforms, if you're by a body of water, elevation, here in Colorado, we should be aware of that, and air movement. So that can affect our short-term daily weather events. Keep in mind, we're talking weather, we're talking short-term. Climate, that's the longer term. When we talk about a climate of an area, that's overall what their general climate is. And things that can affect the climate of different area is wind currents, ocean currents, zones of latitude, obviously, we just covered that, elevation, and topography. We'll get into more as we look at the different areas of the world that we're going to be studying, all the different continents and all the different areas on the continents, and we'll be looking at what things affect their climate. We're going to be looking at the climate. We're not concerned about the day-to-day weather. When we're studying geography, we're going to be looking at the climate. We will worry about our day-to-day weather here in Colorado. Unfortunately, since you guys are taking online classes, this class will never be canceled because of snow. But I always do keep an eye on the weather. So, and we have had situations with the weather affecting, like there's been outages or some of the fires that happened. Even this last fall, there was fires in a certain area that knocked out the ability for some of my students to attend class. But that's what we'll be watching the weather here locally. Climate we'll be studying as we look at the different parts of and locations in our amazing world. So let me know if you have any questions. I sure appreciate you all joining me today. Remember that all questions are great questions. This is Jennifer Haar, and I'll see you in class. Thanks.